Welcome everybody to the 2024 edition of the OpenColorIO Virtual Town Hall, the Academy Software Foundation. We're excited you're here. As a reminder, this event is being recorded, and it will be available on YouTube later down the line. So just an FYI, you're being recorded. The other thing is that you have questions throughout the presentation. Please utilize the chat feature in the Zoom to put those questions in there, and as long as we have time at the end of the presentation, we'll get to them live. If not, we'll follow up on Slack afterward with those of you that have questions. And so with that, my name is Carol Payne. I should have said that earlier. I am the OpenColorIO Technical Steering Committee Chair, and we have a bunch of speakers today to talk about a lot of exciting work happening in the project. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves as they come on and speak in the interest of time. Here's what our agenda looks like today, and I'm not going to read through all of this stuff because it is a lot. We have lots of exciting things going on in the projects, and I want to say a big thank you up front to our speakers today who have spent time putting all of this together for all of you. Speaking of people that make this project happen, this is our technical steering committee for this year. And I want to say a big shout out to all of them. They are the people that make OpenColorIO run. They help us decide what initiatives to tackle. They contribute code, they do code reviews, and they contribute and discussions in the meetings. And so they're all amazing people, and I want to give a big shout out to them, and especially to Doug as our chief architect, who is our guiding steering ship, and without him we could not do all of the amazing things that we do. So look at the past year. We've had a lot going on this last year, and a lot of it isn't super reflected in a schedule, in a release schedule like this. We've been working towards lots of different initiatives that will actually come to pass next year, and Doug will talk about that a little bit more later. But we did have a bunch of releases, our normal release cadence annually, and then some patch fixes throughout the year, config updates. And I want to make one note on this slide, and that is that we do already have for this calendar year a 1-month extension on the VFX reference platform deadline. So you'll note that reflected on this slide, and that is to make sure that we do the best possible job we can getting the awesome work of the ACES team into this year's 2.4 OCIO release. So be flexible with us on that, and our release will be a month later than typical this year. Want to mention up front, we have a lot of places you can get involved with the project with our normal website. I want to mention the main place these days that communication happens on the project is on our Slack. We have a separate Slack instance than the Academy Software Foundation Slack instance. It predates the foundation, and we keep thinking about migrating over, but we haven't done it yet. So our Slack instance is separate. It's got lots of channels on there, and we tend to respond most quickly via Slack. If you prefer email, we do have several mailing lists. These days, what we use that for is big blasts of information out to the people on that mailing list, such as events like these. We also have a new fancy URL for our calendar, calendar.opencolorio.org, where you can see all of our scheduled meetings right and nice and pretty. And on the other side of the slide, we've got lots of ongoing initiatives and working groups. Most of them happen Mondays at noon Pacific. So you can pretty much count on an OCIO meeting happening every Monday at noon Pacific. So if you just want to jump in and hang out with OCIO folks, that's when to do it. We'll talk more about most of these initiatives later in this presentation. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Doug to talk about some library updates.
Thank you very much, Carol, and thank you for your excellent leadership of this project. It's been such a pleasure to work with you this past year and accomplish so many great things. So let's get into the updates on the library itself. Next slide, please. So as Carol mentioned, we've got the 2.4 library, which needs to be released on October 1st to make it part of the VFX reference platform, which means it would be the official release that is expected to ship in applications for next calendar year, 2025. So our biggest feature for 2.4 is going to be what we're calling a preview of our support of ACES 2.0. So ACES 2.0 is a big project, and by October 1st, we're not going to have a final release of that, but at least it will be enough for people to try things out and give us feedback on that. And that will include, our goal is for that to include ACES 2 support in the built-in configs that are built into the library itself. So like many software projects, we have developers not only working on the upcoming release, but also working on future releases. And that is especially true right now with OpenColorIO, where we have a lot of different initiatives going on right now that are not scheduled for the 2.4 release. And so we're going to talk more about those in the coming slides. I think the only thing on this one that I don't have a slide for is the common LUT format support. So as you may be aware, SMPTE has a drafting group that's working on making a common LUT format a SMPTE standard. And so when that comes out, we're anticipating it's probably going to be early next year. We'll be upgrading our support for CLF. Next slide, please. So in addition to the headline features that we talk about in presentations like this, there's a ton of stuff that's being contributed to the library, that's coming in all the time. And I don't have time to go through all of these, but I just want to give a huge shout out to all of our contributors who have been working and contributing features and fixes all during the year. So thank you very much to all of you. Next slide, please. Also want to give a shout out to the OpenFX team. So OpenFX has a new release coming out. I believe it's SIGGRAPH, OpenFX 1.5, and OpenColorIO support is one of their big new features. So this is the ability for either the host or the plugin or both to use OpenColorIO for color management, and it allows you to do things like negotiate the preferred color space, to tag the clips being exchanged back and forth with a color space. So we're really looking forward to this, and a big shout out to Jean-Paul Smith from BorisFX and the rest of the OpenFX team for implementing this. OpenFX is having their town hall presentation tomorrow morning. So I encourage you to listen to that for more details on this. Next slide, please. One of the features that we talked about in this presentation last year was config merging. So the idea here is that it would enable configs to be built up from a series of components. It would allow applications who need certain color spaces to be in a config to transparently add them to the user config. It would make it simpler to do things like add a LUT to an existing config, which is a common request that we hear from people. So just wanted to give you an update on this, that work is ongoing. There is a branch that implements this, and that has a lot of cool features. If you're interested in this, please reach out to us on Slack. Next slide, please. Another thing that's ongoing is ACES metadata file support. So this is part of the ACES system. It's a sidecar file that documents the color pipeline that's associated with a clip or piece of media. And we first introduced prototype support in OCIO in 2022 via a Python script. And the way that worked is it generated a CTF file that could be used in OCIO to apply the remaining color processing that was not already part of the clip itself. So there's work going on led by Bill Bowen of AJA and Chandi Navaratan to add this as an official part of the C++ library. And the idea here is that rather than generating a CTF file, the AMF would become an OCIO config. And this would essentially document the entire AMF pipeline, and it would allow people to convert between any two steps in that pipeline. And potentially it could be merged into a larger user config that the application is using. So there's prototype for this, and we're looking for help testing it. So if you're interested, please reach out to us on Slack. Next slide, please. Okay, at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Thomas Mansencal from Wētā, who's going to tell us the new things that are happening in OCIOView. So last year, you may remember Michael Dolan, who contributed this feature originally, gave an introduction to this at last year's town hall presentation. And so this year, Thomas is going to fill us in on what's been happening since then.
Thank you, Duke, for that update of the core library. Next slide, please, Carol. Thank you. So yeah, OCIOView is visual editor for OpenColorIO configs. If you don't know what it is, that's kind of the gist of it. It's used to embody best practices in terms of UX around presenting OpenColorIO in DCC, and it's also a test bed for us to implement features, test them, and all those things with the API. So between last year and this year, we improved the macOS support, and we are now using PySite 6 instead of PySite 2 to be compliant with the VFX reference platform. We improved also the internal message queue. It's kind of thread-safe message queue that is used to pass messages around the application between different parts of the OCIOView. We updated the processor that contains the actual active processor that represent current transformation has been updated so that we can have more information about transform name, what is the active color space, and all those things. And it's what is enabling the new chromaticity inspector functionality, which we will see in the next slide, please. All right, so we have a new chromaticity inspector to analyze chromaticities of the input image. It's using, it's built on top of PyGFX and color visuals. It's actually running with web GPU inside Qt. Was a bit challenging to get that working because of the fight between OpenGL and web GPU. Like, they don't really coexist very nicely inside Qt. We have a bug on the Qt tracker actually related to that, but we managed to get it running by doing off-screen rendering and passing all the events to PyGFX from Qt. So there is a small video that you can take a look at, not only showing the chromaticity inspector, but all the improvement that we made on OCIOView. So if you scan the QR code, you can go check that video later. Next slide, please. We also improved the curve inspector, especially the representation of log scale. So now the axis is using a square grid, makes comparison of the curves a bit easier. So it's a nice feature, small improvement, but important from a visual standpoint. And analysis also. Next slide, please. Like something that is really recent, actually not merged yet, but Micah has pushed as a PR is new cascading color space menu, which are representing what we should see in DCC software when presenting the color spaces. So Nuke is very similar to that, but that's kind of the intent of what should be OCIO UX representation. So it's available across the application. Next slide, please. And there is a new feature which is called preview. Again, it's a prototype for UX implementation, but that's the idea of like how should you present a display view combo into a DCC. Nuke right now, for example, has a very flat, long single, combo box menu. Not really easy to pick a display and view transform combo, and with that new widget, which is in preview and called preview, we are not attached to the name. Like we are intending to showcase how the display and view transform should be presented in DCC. It's going to be used as a UX kind of reference implementation with notes and all that kind of stuff. And it's also a good reminder that OCIOView is really easy to dive into. It's Python based, doesn't require building the library, the core library, because everything is pulled from PyPy. So if you're a developer and willing to dabble and dip your toes, in OpenColor development world, that's a good entry point. It's fairly easy to get rolling with, and I think that's it for me. We'll be talking about the roadmap next, and there we go. Giving back the mic.
Awesome, thank you, Thomas. So let's talk about the OCIO roadmap. Obviously, OCIO is used in a lot of different software applications. It's used in a lot of tools and pipelines around the world, and we want to be good citizens in terms of keeping everyone up to speed on what's going on in the project. So to that end, next slide, please. We have put together a roadmap, and you can access this. It's on our GitHub, but you can access it through roadmap.opencolorio.org. We have this divided into 3 categories: now, next, and later. So now is obviously what we're working on at any given moment. Next is a list of things that we're getting ready to implement. So we're in the planning phase for it. And so if you're interested in any of these things, now is the ideal time to provide feedback to us. It's very simple. You just click on the item that you're interested in. It will take you to the GitHub issue page, and you just type in your comments right there. So we'd love to hear feedback on these things. Later these are items that it's not our complete backlog. It's just a selection of items that are particularly interesting to us, and we want to give some visibility that like these are kind of some key things that we're thinking about for an upcoming release. And so again, if you have feedback on them, or you're interested in contributing to the implementation of these, we'd like to hear from you. So this is a very sort of curated list. It's not everything in the backlog. It's things that we've selected as being particularly noteworthy. So for people who are not following like the day-to-day of the project, but just want to get at an overview, like what's going on, this is the place to go. Next slide, please. For people who are interested in a more granular look at what's going on, like individual tasks that are being worked on, we've created milestones in GitHub. So we have, for example, a milestone for the OCIO 2.4.0 release that has the issues that we're anticipating being part of this release. You can see the progress of individual things. I've put the URL to this down at the bottom of the page for you. And if we go to the next slide, this is similarly a milestone for the configs work. So the configs work that we're thinking is part of the 2.4 release. This is a milestone on the OpenColorIO config ACES GitHub repo. And again, you can find the URL there for that. And if we go to the next slide, we've created a milestone for the NanoColor project, which we'll be talking about in a minute. to allow you to track progress on that as well. So we hope with the combination of the roadmap for sort of a high level view of what's happening at the project and the milestones for a more granular look, that this will help you give you the amount of insight into the project that you're looking for, that will allow you to track the project in the way that's most convenient for you. I want to thank Carol, who's put a lot of work into shaping the backlog over the past year. We still have more work to do on that, but that has, we're trying to make the project really more accessible for people to track it. And if you have any feedback along those lines, we'd love to hear it. So that's it for the roadmap section.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. There's always more GitHub backlog work to do. I don't think that will ever end, but we'll make it a constant effort. We want to talk a little bit next about the Color Interop Forum, which is an initiative that we started earlier this year, and it's a pretty brand new initiative for us, and we really started it because between Doug and I and the rest of the OCIO TUC and lots of other ASWF members, there is a lot of interoperability of color and image related things in our industry. A lot of them, obviously, we deal with a lot of them in OpenColorIO world, but it's not only OpenColorIO. It exists cross-project between foundation projects, between non-foundation projects, between DCCs, between different disciplines. If you're thinking about like real-time applications versus cinema applications and all of these things. So we really felt that there was a place for an open forum where folks could come to bring things they'd like to talk about, issues they have, projects they'd like to work on, things they'd like to see get decided. And we did it. We launched the ASWF Color Interop Forum earlier this year. And the three main goals are on this slide. But for us, we really wanted it to be an open space to discuss problems that people want to talk about, bring together lots of experts from many different disciplines. So you do not have to be a color expert in order to join these discussions. Oftentimes the folks that have these issues are not, and they need a place where they can come and talk to experts about, they might have expertise in another area, but it impacts it and it interweaves with color and imaging related issues. So that's this forum. We meet monthly on Mondays again. It's one of those Monday slots at 12 p.m. Pacific. We have our own Slack channel on the ASWF Slack. It's Color Interop Forum, and it is on the ASWF Slack on purpose because this initiative and this forum is cross-project. It is not a requirement that you use OCIO or know OCIO in order to participate in this forum. And we actually have, we've been working on our first initiative, which is a standardization of color space encodings for texture assets and CG rendering. I know that is a mouthful, but you guys have probably seen rumblings of this around in lots of different Slack channels, folks needing a way to know that when they say, Rec 709 linear, that it is named the same, defined the same, called the same, used the same, across multiple different places and things, interoperability. So we kind of took a look at this issue, and the group has come up with a white paper proposal. Thanks, Doug, for the first initial draft of this. It's really excellent. It's very detailed. It has the list of color spaces that we're proposing. And I do want to note the name is really important. This is for texture assets and CG rendering explicitly. So in a scene referred space, you'll see that a lot throughout the document. Down the line, we may extend this, but for right now, it's for use in assets and rendering. So if this list looks incomplete to you, it is a part of a larger. We do not expect this list to satisfy everybody's needs for all color space definitions everywhere. That would be a very tough thing to do. But in this space in particular, in the the interop of assets between applications, and the different ways of, rendering and passing like data around like that. It really is helpful to have standard definitions that meet all of those needs. And in particular, it's going to get used in the next initiative we're going to talk about. So if you have feedback on this, the QR code will take you directly to this white paper draft. Leave your comments directly on this doc, or feel free to Slack them to us in the ASWF Color Interop Forum Slack would be preferable. But we're going to be passing this around starting now and through SIGGRAPH for feedback. So we look forward to that, and to sort of see an example of where this something like this might be used. Oh wait, I have one more thing to say. Because we're in a draft of this this work, our first initiative, we are open to, I mean, we always are, but right now in particular, we are open to proposals and participation for future work in this group. This group is an open place where you can bring problems and help craft those solutions. And so we'd be really interested to see people come forward with proposals for next work for the group, knowing that it's a group effort and it takes everybody to come together and make these things happen. This is, as much as we would, if we had more time or more Dougs or more Thomases or more Remys, we would do all the work we could, but we need more folks to participate and join in on this work. It is not just an OCIO initiative. So this is not something where it would go on the OCIO roadmap. This is a separate initiative and we need folks to participate. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Doug to talk about NanoColor.
Awesome. Thank you, Carol. Right. So so I'm going to talk about an exciting new initiative for the OCIO team in collaboration with some other projects. Next slide, please. So this is a slide from last year. So in the presentation last year, I was saying that, we really see web and mobile becoming increasingly important, and it would be great to have a lighter weight version of OCIO that would be able to run in those environments. And we talked about this during the town hall. It was a topic of conversation during the Birds of a Feather session at last SIGGRAPH, and we got good feedback, positive feedback on that. So if we go to the next slide. So at that point, we were calling it OCIO Lite, and we're getting good feedback. In parallel to that, Material X has been a project that we've long been wanting to collaborate with more closely, and just hadn't been able to find quite the right way to meet the needs of both projects. But it's been on our radar for a long time. But what really kickstarted things was a conversation we had with Pixar last December, and they were telling us about their idea for what they were calling NanoColor, and we realized that all three of these have a lot of overlap between the goals. And so we decided we would try to collaborate and turn this into a project that would meet the needs of all three projects. So if we go to the next slide. So at the beginning of the year, the three projects collaborated on a charter to define what this working group would try to take on to meet the needs of all three projects. We socialized this on various forums. So you probably saw this sometime in the spring of this year. There's a QR code there if you haven't seen it already. But with that, we started working. So once we had the charter, we started investigating the C++ aspect of this. So if we go to the next slide. So this is a lightweight version of OCIO intended to be friendly for a web browser or mobile phone. One of the key principles that's very important to Carol and I is that this live in the same cinematic universe as full OCIO, by which we mean that there needs to be a straightforward path for interop with full OCIO and upgrading to full OCIO. So if an application starts using NanoColor, for example, and then decides their needs have gotten more sophisticated, that they can easily make the transition to full OCIO. So in order to meet the needs of having no external dependencies and so forth, there are some limitations. So there will be no support for user-defined configs or LUTs. There will be a selection of built-in configs that people can choose from, and this will include things like the studio config that's already built into the library that provides full ACES support. That said, there will be the ability to do some customization via the API for applications that want to do that. So for example, you'll be able to add new color spaces. You'll be able to hide color spaces that you don't want to show up in menus, for example. But there will be no way to override certain core color spaces, which are the color spaces in the list that Carol was talking about a minute ago from the Color Interop Forum of core color spaces. So those color spaces will always mean the same thing. So that's, in a nutshell, what this project is about. I don't have time to talk about the whole thing in detail today, but if we go to the next slide, this is something that we're giving a whole talk specifically on NanoColor. So that's part of Open Source Days. It's scheduled for Sunday. You can attend this in person at SIGGRAPH, or you can register to watch this live online, and it will be available at some point after that on YouTube as well. In addition, at our OpenColorIO Birds of a Feather session at SIGGRAPH, we're planning on using the bulk of that session for talking about NanoColor as one of our key initiatives where we really want to get feedback from the community. So if you are going to be at SIGGRAPH, we'd love to have you join us for that conversation. And if you want to track the project more closely, we have a NanoColor channel set up on the OCIO Slack. And in addition, at the bottom there, I've put the URL to our branch of our prototype. So we on the OCIO GitHub, we do have a prototype of this already that you're welcome to try if you're interested in this. There's installation instructions, build instructions there, and you'll find that at that URL. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Scott Dyer and Kevin Wheatley to tell us about very interesting developments from the Academy Color Encoding System. This is a development that's been many years in the making, and it represents a huge amount of R&D work from Kevin Wheatley and Alex Fry, who have led a very amazing group of contributors working on ACES 2. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Scott to tell us about ACES 2.
All right, thanks, Doug. So yeah, let's jump right into the slides here. Okay, so just a quick level setting reminder. We've heard it mentioned many times throughout this conversation, but ACES stands for the Academy Color Encoding System. And so as a system, there are many components that help to make that up. One of those things is, and these have been the foundation of ACES for the longest time, is the image file formats. So there are standards that exist in OpenEXR, SMPTE 2065-4, and then the image encodings that go into those files. So for example, 2065-1, which is the ACES linear scene encoding. We also have ACES CG, ACES CCT. So we have these various image encodings. And then finally, and most importantly, there's the transforms, and the transforms are kind of the connection that go between those other components that are not, you need to get from one to the other, and that's where OCIO comes in to help us out. So the transforms have three main purposes. The first one is obviously to transition between those encodings, going from ACES linear to ACES CG or ACES CCT using a color space conversion transform. Input transforms to go from some camera log encoding into the ACES linear encoding. The transforms can also modify data, and this might be either technically or creatively, and we usually encapsulate those in look transforms and track that stuff using the metadata file sidecar. And finally, and most importantly to this conversation, is the transforms that render outputs to a particular display. And these are transitions from scene-referred data to display-referred images, and let us create outputs to our display devices. And so all these components are specified by the Academy. We all our volunteers and contributors write these specifications and also contribute to developing the ACES 2 display transforms. And we put that out there to developers and to implementers, and they put it into their tools. And many will build it in as transforms into their software or hardware, but many of them leverage OCIO to get support for ACES in their tools quickly and in a robust and reliable manner. And so we're very appreciative to OCIO's ongoing support of ACES and their efforts to make ACES work and get it into the hands of as many users as possible. Next slide. So why a 2.0? Well, ACES 1 has been out for over 10 years now. And during that time, we've collected a lot of feedback and requests from users who, for the most part, like what ACES can get them, but they, everyone has their own things that they would like improved or changed. And we've been working a very long time to try to come up with updates to this display transform. So the highlights of some of those feedback and requests, that all influenced our design and where we ended up. It was a very difficult task to satisfy all of those requirements, but I'm going to highlight just a few of the changes of what you might expect in ACES 2.0 and why you should be looking forward to it later this year. So less aggressive tone scale, better preservation of perceived hue across exposure changes of your image. We've added a robust gamut compression so that there's less image artifacts around when values end up outside of your display's gamut, whereas before we were just clipping them off. Easily customized outputs, so this gives greater flexibility to users who want to or need to create outputs to displays other than the presets that are predefined or provided within their software as is. And then a big one has been improved invertibility, and this kind of supports all facets of using ACES because it enables people to match looks and to generate backwards compatibility for existing workflows and things like that. So next slide, please. Let's just highlight a few of these and show you some visual examples. So the first thing is a less aggressive tone scale. Mainly, we've reduced the mid-slope contrast ever so slightly, which is the less aggressive part. And then a softer shoulder roll-off. So the white line on the right side of your screen is showing you kind of the overlay of the system tone scale. And you can see the reduced contrast and softer roll-off. Next slide. Preservation of visual hue. This is just an example showing kind of in ACES 1.3 where things like reds, blues, as you increased exposure, the perceived hue of that color where you would expect it to maintain the same color, perceived color, it's going either orangey or purpley, and we've improved that hue linearity in ACES 2. Next slide, please. So the next one is the robust gamut compression. Now in ACES 1.3, this is a notorious artifact blue clipping, and in fact, Carol and others in this call have were contributors to a thing called the reference gamut compression, which was in 1.3 of ACES and was kind of a patch, a temporary patch, until we could fix this more robustly with the output transforms. The reference gamut compression still might have usages, but this is showing you the effect of not even needing to use that with ACES 2.0. So this is just out of the box with ACES 2.0, no gamut compression applied as a look transform, but this is just built into the display transform itself and preventing a lot of the same image artifacts that we would see with blue LEDs or extreme color values in your scene image. So that's a great improvement. And next slide, please. Easily customized outputs. We've added a few outputs that were not provided in ACES 1. This is just based on user feedback as to what people tend to need outputs for. So we've added a 500 nit peak luminance level as a preset. But the advantage of the way 2.0 is built is that if somebody needed to create a display transform to any particular output luminance or display gamut encoding, there is complete flexibility in there to generate a custom output to the specific device characteristics that they need. So if one of the presets does not satisfy the needs, making a consistent output to some sort of specification is trivial to do and fully supported. Next slide. Finally, invertibility is improved, and this, as I mentioned, is very important for matching looks or for bringing in output referred imagery into ACES in a consistent way, logos and things like that. In 1.3, this is showing an example of, for example, the yellow corner of your gamut you would expect going through the inverse and then a forward transform again, a round trip, as we call it, you would get back to the original value, but you see that you do not get back to the original yellow. And so in 2.0, we're showing that you can, and that holds true for all the values, at least up to P3. And beyond P3, it behaves pretty well also, but we tested it and designed it to minimally work up to P3. And that is a huge improvement and one of the most requested features for 2.0 to have better invertibility. So those are just some of the highlights of ACES 2 and what it's going to get you. We're still putting the finishing touches on everything, but OCIO has been great for extending their timeline and doing everything that they have been doing to support us and to help push ACES to get it into the hands of as many users as soon as possible. So thank you, and that is ACES 2.
Thank you very much, Scott. That was a great overview. I don't know if Kevin wants to add anything additionally, but this is, I think everyone can see from those slides all of the work that has gone into this. The commonly requested features have been addressed. This is, taking advantage. There's a lot in here. This is taking advantage of, recent developments in color appearance modeling that have gone into this. There's much more sophisticated gamut mapping than was used in the ACES 1.0 output transform. So there's really a lot here. And thank you, Scott, for that great overview of it. And now I'd like to turn it over to Rémi Achard from DNEG to talk about the implementation of this in OpenColorIO. Rémi.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Scott, for the great overview. So yeah, in the next couple of slides, I wanted to talk about the implementation efforts in OCIO. Next slide, please. So the new output transform will be implemented as a set of built-in transforms. So that means basically we are targeting a LUT-free implementation similar to ACES 1 in the new OCIOView configs. The list of transform will closely follow the ACES Outputs Academy repository. We are looking at around 50-ish new built-in transform that will target various display devices at 2 different creative waypoints. Internally, those built-in transforms will be implemented as a fixed function. There will be probably around 3 different new fixed functions to support the ACES2 output transform algorithm. Those will be parametrable for custom display device targeting. So you will be able to specify your display luminance, peak luminance, as well as gamuts, and create new output transform from the OCIO config. Finally, we are also looking at supporting individual components of the ACES2 algorithm that could be useful for overuse. Like the tone curve is a good candidate for that. Next slide, please. So yeah, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the implementation. So we have to know that there is like an initialization phase for this transform where we have to pre-compute currently a set of tables that are used to find the gamut boundary and cusp in the various steps of the algorithm, including the gamut mapping too. We explore some strategies to generate those tables that includes compile time generation versus runtime. Compile time is using the C++ constexpr feature. It's currently still a test we are making, so it's not clear whether we are going to use compile or runtime. But we have to note, like in any case, we are going to need runtime for custom output transform anyways. The implementation that will ship in OCIO 2.4.0 is going to be a preview, as Doug mentioned earlier. The code is going to more or less follow the CTL code from the ACES dev repo. And the GPU path currently is going to use a texture to store and send the table mentioned earlier to the GPU. We already have planned improvement for the next minor release, so OCIO 2.4.1. The main thing would be further optimization to both the algorithm and the code to make the transform run faster. And we are also targeting a texture-free GPU implementation path in line with the effort for NanoColor mentioned earlier. So we have to note that the strict numerical outputs will not be guaranteed between 2.4.1 and 2.4.0 as the optimization are rolled into the code. Now I think I'm done yet. Back to you, Carol.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rémi. Want to give a huge shout out to you for getting through this mountain of work to get the 2.0 transforms into our next release. It's been a ton of work. It's been a great collaboration with the ACES team. And like Rémi said, a lot of the things that, we're still continually working on are in the optimization, the making this faster, the making it work better kind of phase, the making it easier to use. But we did want to put it out. We are going to put it out in this first release of 2.4 because we want folks to start seeing it and seeing what it's going to look like in the library and the API and start testing things. And it'll be there for you to give feedback and to start trying it out. So we really want to emphasize that, like we said, this is a preview, but we do want you to try it and test it out and give us some feedback and help us make this implementation really, really excellent by the end of this year. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Thomas, who also has been doing and will continue to do as we get further in this large amounts of work on the configs side of OCIO to make it easy for folks to use all of these new fancy transforms that we're implementing in the library. Thomas?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Karen and Rémi. It's good actually because it shows that we're all working lockstep to provide that to users. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, like what are the new ACES configs? It's basically like 3 configs. One of them you mostly never see. That's a reference config for ACEs. It's mostly something we use to make sure that the config generator works. It can be used as a reference for developers. So the process is roughly we are pulling from the CTL code we're discovering all the CTL transforms and pulling them in a list, sorting them by categories. Those are CSC, IDTs, output transform, look transforms, and from that kind of a set of CTL transform, we generate that reference config for ACEs, and that config, which is not really usable, is used to build like the two built-in OCIO library configs, which are like the CG config and the studio config. So the CG config is mostly for CG artists that are not interacting with camera data, camera plates, or stills. So if you're an animation or like in Unreal Engine, for example, it's a really good one, or a game engine for that matter. It's obviously a subset of the studio config, which has a camera transform, more output transform. Like it's basically implementing the entirety of the CTL, of the AC CTL code base, plus extra stuff that we do add, like new spaces that are useful for interop with other kind of DCCs and things like that. Next slide, please. So whilst we haven't done too much work yet on AC's 2.0 support, because we're in need of the library to implement like the built-in transform, at least like expose them for the Python API, we have started the work of discovering, classifying, and like sorting all the CTL transform. So the way the new AC's repo will be built is different in 2.0. So in AC's dev, like which is a reference CTL transform, you had like there is one repo effectively. With AC's 2.0, there will be multiple repositories. There will be one for AMF, one for AC scores, input, color space transforms, the looks and output, and that's gonna allow the system to have part of it evolve at different cadence without like imposing necessarily like a major release of AC's dev. But what we will do, and Alex Forsyth and Scott are working on that, there will be a kind of mono, like not mono, but like super repository that will use all those repository I mentioned and add them as submodules, and that's what we will be building the new AC's 2.0 configs against. So that's what we're currently, there is a prototype of that repository. It's going to be tagged yearly as progress is made on the subrepos, and that's what we're discovering and classifying the CTL transform as of right now in kind of experimental branch of the configs. Next slide, please, Carl. So as far as implementation goes and support, I think like we're not fully settled on that, but we talk a lot about it, and we will be forking the ACES 1 and ACES 2 configs. So doing so, I didn't mention it, but we have a few spreadsheets to drive what goes into the configs, and we will also split those spreadsheets because the ACES transform IDs have changed, the naming has changed, so it becomes really hard to maintain those two things concurrently. So we'll likely fork the two config versions. So ACES 1 will have its on branch and on spreadsheets, and ACES 2 will have the same, and we'll be maintaining like fixing issues in ACES 1.0. I will go on to those details in the next slide, but Bus branch will have their own life until ACES1 basically stalls because there won't be any update to it. One of the things that we need to discuss is how to bring transformation from ACES 1.0 in the ACES 2.0 configs. So we'll probably be leveraging the config merging feature, and we'll also be writing examples on how to do that. Another discussion is to be had is ACES 2.0 provide a consistent set of D60 versus D65. So D60 versus D65, for example, white point and output transform. Do user want all of those in the configs? One of the critique that was made from or to the original ACES1 config was that they were among us and really big. So do we want all those white points represented, or those output transform, or do we want multiple configs, one with D65, one with both? So there will be discussion about that, and working to hear your thoughts at the birds of further session. So keep a note on the timeline. Yeah, next slide, thank you. In terms of planned features, so for ACES 1 and 2, we'll be adding upper logs that the PR that was provided by Joseph Goldstone from Murray. It's going to be merged in both branches. We'll get the Color Interop Forum, Color Spaces recommendation with the new names. It's supporting Material X 1.39. For ACES 2.0, we'll just have obviously the ACES to output transform. And in terms of fixes, as I was mentioning, there are a few issues on GitHub that will be rolling, missing encoding attributes, and will reactivate the display color space because they are missing and making transformation hard. Next slide. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, that is. Thank you, everybody, for all of that, all of our presenters and our contributors. We really couldn't do without you. And so we want to take one more opportunity to say thank you. Thank you very much. We've said all of these things throughout the presentation, so I'm not going to go through them in the interest of time, but please do, if you're going to be around SIGGRAPH, join us in person. And for the first event, you can join us virtually as well.
And
I want to give a quick. Oh, go ahead, Doug. Go ahead, Doug.
At OpenColorIO, if you're going to be in SIGGRAPH, please join us for our social event at the end of the day after the Birds of a Feathers.
Yes, we're going to go have drinks with those that are in person with us. It'll be super fun. I want to give a quick shout out to Dev Days. It's our second time ever doing Dev Days with the Academy Software Foundation. It's like our hackathon. It's a 48-hour open source development event. And OpenColorIO is going to be participating again. It's taking place at the end of September, and we're giving it a shout out here. Registration is going to open at Open Source Days, so look out for more info on the ASWF website for that. But get excited about that. It's a really, really, really fun event. I'm going to put this slide here one more time for anybody that missed this at the beginning and is wondering how to get in touch with any of us. And I think, honestly, we've really only got 1 minute left. So I don't know that we, in the interest of getting folks to the OpenEXR town hall, I think that I'm going to say, if you have questions from this presentation, please send them to us on Slack. You can put it in our general or our dev channel, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can. Or obviously get in touch with us in any way that you would like, and we'll get your questions answered. And with that, I think I'll say thank you and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in person soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.